Okay, so I found my hand needles, which I had to go and look for. And what I've done is for step 11 on the instructions for this dress is that I have decided which circles I need to gather in between. And so what I've done here is I've got the taily end, what looks like the taily end of the bow, and then there's a kind of a smooth end. So there's a smooth end and there's a taily end that sticks out on both sides. So what I'm on both pieces, sorry. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at step 11 here, and I'll show you the instructions. So on step 11 here, if you have a look, they've got a little taily bit of cotton and another little taily bit of cotton marked on the opposite side of the pattern piece to that kind of split taily end. So I'm going to use that and go with a judgment call that it's these small circles at this side of my fabric that I need to gather up. So I'm going to just quickly do that. I'm not going to put too much of a gather in them. It's something that I can fix when I'm sewing the pattern pieces together later on. And I've just got my small circle here, and I'm going to pop my needle in there, and I'm just going to take this along. I'm going to put a few stitches in, not many. I'm not going to back stitch or anything more complicated than a running stitch for this. If you don't know what a running stitch is, Google it, because I am not that woman to explain that to you. And I'm just going to follow along in a vaguely sort of a line that vaguely matches the pattern piece itself. So I'm not doing a straight line, I'm going along an equal distance from the edge of this pattern piece each time. And I'm just going to put my little running stitches in there all the way to this little circle here. And bring it out just there. Go on, go through. I've got quite a lot of fabric there because of the 2 layers of interfacing, so it didn't really want to come through. Okay, so what I'm going to do then is I'm going to hang on to this here, and I'm just going to pull my thread, and it should just gather a little bit. There we go. I'm going to gather it up about like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just tie this off in a knot. And then later on, when I have to attach this pattern piece to other pattern pieces, I can adjust that gather. And I can either spread it out more or bring it in further, because the cotton's going to still be in here, and I can make sure that it's the right length. So pull this out. Oh, come on, out come. There we go. Get my knot nice and straight, and then I'm going to snip it off. Okay. So I've kind of, and I can adjust it as well so that the gathering is actually equal along the length of the cotton that I've put in there, so that I don't get all gathered at one end and stretched out of the other. I'm just going to put a knot back in this cotton, and then I'm going to go and do my other pattern piece. So let's move this out of the way. Got the other one. So this is a mirror image. Don't forget, we're working in mirror images. So there's my taily end right there. So the things I need to gather between the small circles, that spot is over here. I'm going to go the other way this time because I'm right-handed, and it will be really annoying to try and do it back to front. At this point, things to say: if my arm is in the way and it's getting on your nerves, if you're finding this tutorial hard to follow, if you drank too much wine at the beginning, well, that's not my problem. It's not my circus. They are not my monkeys. This is a tutorial that I'm doing for a friend, and so if you don't like it, well, it sucks to be you. I live my life like that, if I'm honest. If you don't like it, it sucks to be you. I'm gonna just be me. Right, here we go. I've done my running stitches, and I'm gonna pull on that thread a little bit and gather this up. And then when I'm happy, I'm gonna just tie a little knot there. Try not to get it around the head of the pin, because that would be super annoying. And then later on, because I've left the cotton in place and I've left a taily bit hanging out, I can tighten the gather up, or I can loosen the gather and kind of redo it if I want to. Okay, so I'm just going to snip that off and then kind of move that around a bit. There we go. Okay, so I've gathered a bit there and I've gathered a bit on the other one. I'm going to put that needle down so it doesn't go in my foot later. And so now we want to go on to number 12, okay, which means stitch the darts in the bow. Okay, so if I look at these instructions, where are we? The darts in the bow. Okay. All right, so what we have got here is what we need to do. The darts in the bow, we've got a couple of different darts in the bow. We've got this one here, this taily end here is a dart, okay? And what we need to do is to kind of fold it over so that the right sides of our fabric are together. So we'll turn this over and we need to just fold this up like this so that these two edges, so that these two taily edges right here are one smack dab on top of the other. So we're going to fold it up, we're going to line them up like this, and then we're going to stitch them, okay? We're going to stitch that dart. And what that's going to do, if I just hold this shut, it's going to start making this, because don't forget, this isn't the whole bow, this is just one side of the bow. So it's going to start making a shape, and then when we stitch other edges together like this, we start ending up with a bit of a bow shape. So that's what we need to do. I'm just going to make sure that I'm definitely doing it right. So that ends up at the bottom, and then we've got that there, boom, over there, and then, yeah, okay, so the other dart we need to stitch is this one here. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch this one. I'm just going to fold it over. And you can see I've got some small circles to match up if I want to, that match with these, oh that was terrible, that wasn't on camera. So you can see I've got these small circles just here on the edge of the taily end of the dart, and they are opposite, funnily enough, these small circles here, which I marked with pins. And so if I want to, when I fold this up and start pinning it ready to sew, that's going to help me to match up my edges, but I cut this out pretty accurately, so I end up with this nice square edge all matchy, so I'm able to just do that. I'm just going to sew this quickly. So if you hear my sewing machine going, again, I'm not a professional YouTuber, I'm doing this as a favour for a friend, I don't care. Alright, so I've done one, and you can see that it's nice and neat and tidy, and I'm going to just do this other one here, and then I'm going to do the same on the other pattern piece. And again, I've got small circles on both sides of this seam that I'm about to make, that will help me to line this up and guide me if I want it to. and I should end up with something that looks pretty good. Now, what it also says in the instructions is to trim these seams and then to press them open. And so all I'm going to do to trim the seam, I'm going to come along, especially because I've used 2 layers of stiffening to keep it really solid and nice and upright. I'm just going to come along here and trim that off, so that I've ended up with a really small seam. I'm not even going to bother to try and press that open because I've made it so close to this. Now I'm not gonna have to worry about this coming undone at any point, because I'm gonna put so much decoration on the outside of this that it's gonna be hand sewn and probably glued shut as well by the time I'm finished. And I'm gonna do the same with the other end that I've just sewn, the other dart that I've just sewn. I'm gonna just take my scissors and I'm gonna trim along this nice and close to the stitching that I did. There we go. So if you've got netting or fabric and you haven't used any sort of interfacing, then you need to go through the step of, once you've trimmed this, to press it open, or to press it to one side at least, so that you end up with a nice flat seam on this side of it, because that's the important bit. That looks pretty good. Okay, so let's do the other one. So again, I've got my pattern piece, and the 2 edges I need to deal with are this one here, the bit with the V basically, and this taily end. Okay, and I'm just gonna make my edges nice and lined up and smart, and I'm gonna sew along just to make a nice normal seam there. Now the other thing I've been doing as I go along with this garment, especially with the extra stitching that you have to put through the middle of this bow and all of the rest of it, is that I've been tidying up all of my loose bits of cotton as I go, as I sew. And that's been really helping, because the worst thing in the world when you get to the end of this particular dress, because it's got all of the wankery on the front that we're adding to it, is that you end up... That's better. Is that you end up with 1,000 loose threads that you can't find the end of in order to get rid of. So just get rid of them on your way, and then you don't have to go back and try and find them at the end. Did I get both ends of that? I did. I did. Okay, and all I'm going to do again, just like I did before, is I'm going to find where I've sewn that dart, and I'm going to trim quite close to it, just to, that's it, just to keep it nice and neat and tidy. Where's the other one? There it is. I'm going to trim that off. Lovely. There we go. Okay, so I've now ended up with 2 kind of squared up bits of bow that are starting to look quite good. So I've got my tabs down here that help me line it up with the rest of the bodice when it's time to sew it on. I've got my darts all nice and neatly stitched together. And so, and I've done that on both bits of bow, and you can see that I've still got, turn around you. I've still got 2 really nice looking mirror images that are starting to look quite bow-like if you were to put together the gathered edges and try and start lining them up.